On a sunlit morning steeped in reflection, Sung Tae stood with a commanding presence, his gaze lifted skyward as he admitted to Han, who watched him curiously from the corner, that at first he had seen only the shadow of Han's father and the boy before him. In the hushed corridor of an old school, Han stood uncertain as Sung Tae, his eyes wary, confessed that he always assumed Han would be strange because of his infamous parentage, while Jin-tae watched the tense exchange in silence. Then, as the tension lingered in the quiet corridor, Han looked up with curiosity and reached out, asking for the other's name, and Jin-tae remarked that there was something different about them. In a sunlit room scattered with toys and a castle model, two boys sat facing each other, and as Han listened in quiet reflection, Jin-tae revealed that being together allowed him to feel like any ordinary boy, not just a soul carrier. In the hush of falling snow outside a quiet city street, Han stood close to Jin-tae, feeling a wave of surprise as Sung Tae confessed how deeply he had admired, worried over, and cared for him. On a quiet afternoon filled with hesitant hope, Han stood close to Jin-tae, clutching a sandwich with trembling hands as he realized that loving him had always felt entirely natural. Now, as Han sank onto the bench with his head buried in his hands, regret washed over Jin-tae while he confessed to Han that his feelings had consumed him so deeply he'd lost sight of everything else. In the flickering shadows cast by a burning building, Jin-tae stood consumed by regret, admitting to himself that had he foreseen their interest in Han, he would have chosen to lead the club differently and shielded them all from the consequences now unfolding. In the dimly lit hallway, Jin-tae stood tense and wary, restraining himself as he watched another figure walk away, determined not to betray his true intentions through any suspicious action. On the edge of a dimly lit room thick with tension, Han stood uneasily as Sung Tae placed a seemingly reassuring hand on his shoulder, while nearby, Jin-tae watched with a smug smirk and warned that survival would demand more than trust. In the quiet confines of his parked car, Jin-tae sat alone with his head bowed and hand pressed to his forehead, weighed down by the regretful admission that his actions had been driven by utter selfishness. Beneath dim urban lights, Jin-tae stood in his suit, pressing a hand to his forehead as regret overwhelmed him, and he confessed to Ishin that his actions, driven by love, had been selfish. Regret weighed on Jin-tae's shoulders and he admitted he never should have involved Han in the club. Shrouded in ominous darkness, shadowy figures with glowing eyes closed in as the tense realization settled that revealing Han's existence had been a dangerous mistake. In the shadowy depths of a blood-stained forest, a pack of menacing wolves with glowing eyes closed in, as Jin-tae reflected that their desperate attempts to cure a devastating illness had blinded them to the starving cannibals lurking so near. Bathed in a soft, cold light, Jin-tae stood alone, his eyes shadowed with regret as he admitted to himself that every effort he made to hold on to Han now felt like chains binding them both. In a dimly lit hush, Jin-tae's determined hand reached out to gently clasp Han's, his heart resolute as he confessed a longing to protect him and make things right. In the quiet seriousness of the moment, Jin-tae, dressed in black and holding the other's hand, revealed with heartfelt sincerity that true understanding required seeing even the parts of himself he considered unworthy. Inside a dimly lit car on a tense night, Han fixed Jin-tae with a determined gaze as he quietly spoke his name, the air thick with unspoken urgency. In a haze of uncertainty, Han reflected uneasily on Jin-tae's baffling behavior, realizing they had always viewed his actions as distant problems that stirred quiet discomfort. On a day heavy with regret, Han stood lost in thought, a bead of sweat tracing his neck as he silently admitted that his fear of losing Jin-tae had blinded him to the painful truth that all of Jin-tae's sins could be traced back to his own parents. Han silently stated, revealing the toll that was on Jin-tae. Caught between the weight of immortality and the isolation imposed by my presence, my family, and the Phoenix Club. Beneath the neon-lit city sky, Han stood frozen in alarm, his voice trembling as Jin-tae warned Ishin that immortality was to blame and urged him to beware of Choi Il-ho, his concern growing sharper as he questioned the name in the tense night. Jin-tae warned Han that Choi was watching more closely than anyone else. Against the backdrop of a brightly lit geometric pattern building shimmering beneath the night sky, a reflective mood settles as it is revealed that, despite his high position at work, an overwhelming desire for your very existence shapes his every thought. In a shadowed chamber thick with tension, Han and Sung Tae faced a circle of hooded figures as Jin-tae, resolute, revealed he had fought desperately to shield others from being sacrificed, insisting that more time was needed under the guise of examination. Perched anxiously on the jagged edge of a rocky ledge, Jin-tae stared downward, a tense worry filling the air as he confessed his sense that time was quickly running out. Choi Il-ho's unwavering belief that immortality could be found within sacred flesh. Jin-tae warned Han that if let his guard down even a little bit he could be next. In the dimly lit room, Jin-tae's troubled face emerged from the shadows as he admitted with a heavy heart that everything was his fault and he had pulled Han into this mess. In the dim light, Han clutched his shirt with trembling fingers, his voice thick with regret as he insisted that the burden belonged to his parents, not to him. Under the harsh scrutiny of a close-up, Jin-tae's face darkened with guilt as he confessed to trickery, asking if disgust was all he deserved. In a quiet, intimate moment, Han's trembling hand gripped Jin-tae's arm as Jin-tae, looking down, revealed that since their first meeting he had never once felt disgusted by him, his words wrapped in raw sincerity. In the quiet gloom of a dimly lit room, Jin-tae, usually reserved and emotionally guarded, stood with shoulders tense, his gaze dropping as the weight of unspoken vulnerability pressed upon him, the melancholy thickening as Han silently admitted he was shaken by the sight of unshed tears and uncertain how to comfort Jin-tae in this fragile moment. In the shadowed quiet, Han and Jin-tae clung to one another, the gravity of their embrace sealing a pact as Jin-tae states that from this moment, they would share the burden of being accomplices. In the quiet glow of the moment, Han gently cupped Jin-tae's face and, with unwavering sincerity, confessed that he had never loved anyone before, except for Jin-tae. In a quiet, softly lit room, Han and Jin-tae drew so near that anticipation hung between them, tenderness and longing shimmering in their gaze as Jin-tae's hand gently grasped Han's collar, drawing him closer for an intimate, breathless moment. Beneath the soft radiance of a glowing wall, a sleek white car stood parked as dusk settled, its silent presence promising reassurance and a vow to shield a hidden pain from any harm. As someone watches Jin-tae, Han says now it's his turn to protect Jin-tae. Under the canopy of tangled branches, the young Cone man lingered in the half-light, his gaze sharp and unnerving as he silently observed from the shadows. In a quiet moment tinged with nostalgia, Han and Jin-tae held each other close, the world fading away as Han remembered that, back then, Jin-tae was all that mattered to him. On a shadowed tabletop, a battered metal lighter rested in stark relief, its presence charged with a determined resolve as the plan to burn down the Phoenix Club and prevent another sacrifice took shape. In a quiet, intimate moment, Han gently gripped Jin-tae's shirt and leaned in close, his earnest confession revealing that every action he took was not out of righteousness, but purely for Jin-tae. In a quiet, sorrowful space illuminated by a solitary beam, a single white chrysanthemum rests on the ground as the weight of loss settles in, the absence of Jin-tae leaving only loneliness behind. In the dim hush of an empty boxing gym, Han stood alone beneath flickering lights, his head bowed as a heavy melancholy settled over him, weighed down by memories he confessed still clung to his core no matter how hard he tried to fight them. Han reflected that Sung-tae's fate in the other world was a consequence he must bear as part of his own karma. In the hush of a dimly lit, empty room, Han stood tense and wounded, confronting the unseen Sung-tae as he demanded to know why he had been deceived. In a dimly lit solitude, Sung-tae stood exposed by vulnerability, confessing with quiet sincerity that he had only pretended to be oblivious out of fear that Han would abandon him. Then, with the weight of old wounds sharpening his gaze, Sung-tae confronted Han, voicing that after Jin-tae's death, he truly had been left behind. In the hushed glow of a hospital room, Sung-tae sat vigil at Han's bedside, worry etched into his features as he quietly observed that Han hadn't stirred since the moment he was left alone. On a somber afternoon, Sung-tae sat in quiet resignation, his gaze reflecting the emptiness he felt as he acknowledged to himself that he had been left utterly alone, powerless to change his fate. Sung-tae explained that he had gone to see Chairman Jin. As he remembered the encounter, his hands tightened around the curved side, reflecting on how Chairman Jin's unwavering devotion to the immortal had made it effortless to persuade him into accepting the role of a reaper. In a dimly lit industrial space thick with tension, Sung-tae stood firm as Sung-tae, voice trembling with agitation, demanded to know what could have driven him to such reckless action and questioned his sanity. Maintaining his composure amid the uneasy atmosphere, Sung-tae explained that his actions were driven purely by financial desperation, quickly insisting he hadn't done anything as unthinkable as resorting to cannibalism. On a stark white background, a stack of blood-stained money sits alone as Sung-tae reflects with ominous cynicism that in this world, money is paradoxically both the simplest and the most elusive prize, regardless of the suffering it may cause. Now, in the charged silence between them, Han anxiously confronted Sung-tae over whether he had failed to provide enough, only for Sung-tae to calmly insist that the money given was never touched, explaining that the luxuries he acquired, cars and houses, came from elsewhere. Sung-tae smiled softly with closed eyes, his calm voice revealing that he viewed those sacrificed in the assembly as nothing more than human refuse, insisting with a quiet conviction that their removal was a way to purify society. In the shadowy hush of a dimly lit room, Han stood face to face with Sung Tae, anxiety tightening his features as an unspoken tension crackled between them. A wave of realization washed Han. He recognized with quiet dread how much Sung Tae had changed without his noticing. In the soft glow of afternoon light, Han reached out with a gentle smile toward the hand offering a wrapped candy, his hopeful gaze reflecting the quiet promise that redemption was still within reach. Suddenly, Han seized Sung Tae's hands with a determined grip, his urgent expression turning the hopeful atmosphere tense as Han looked on, startled by the abrupt intensity. In a dimly lit corridor heavy with tension, Han, drenched in sweat and clutching his chest in desperation, pleaded urgently with Sung Tae to end the conflict.